Hello there and welcome. This project starts off with a pretty beat up pine Pier 1 dresser and ends in something totally different. This Pier 1 Pine Kids dresser was a free Facebook Marketplace pickup. Looking over the dresser, I found lots of damage on the top. There were holes going through one side to the other from what I assume was a pen or a pencil. Its previous owner was a young adult, but it had been their dresser for most of their life. Deep gouges in some areas, but overall not in bad shape. I felt like I had been given a blank canvas that was in need of some new life. With this surface being raw wood, I decided to use Murphy's oil soap on it to clean it up. It looked pretty grungy, but I didn't want to use crud cutter on it with it being raw wood and risk that leaching into the surface. Dawn dish soap probably would have worked just as well though. Cleaning this dresser turned my cleaning cloth into a Rorschach painting. What images do you see in it? It's pretty gross. I went back with a wet cloth and wiped everything down with water after I had used the Murphy's oil soap to remove any residue and additional dirt that may have come off the dresser. After I was done cleaning the dresser, I went and removed all of the wooden handles. One of the wooden handles looked like it had silly putty or some kind of putty stuck on it, or maybe Elmer's glue. It wasn't normal, whatever it was. It wasn't just plain wood glue. But I ended up prying that handle off. I wasn't planning on using the wood handles anyways, but because it's soft pine, it did create some indents on the wood that I'd had to go back and fill in after the fact. So that part was interesting. I needed to put some wood filler on the faces of the drawers and then sand them down. The easiest way to do that is to take them out. And so I ended up removing all of the drawers and just lining them up according to where they slid back in on the dresser. I came in with some Varathane wood filler. It's a 2-part wood filler that dries pretty quickly and hard. I ended up filling in the handles and any gouges that I could find on the surfaces of the wood. This may seem like a lot of work to prep the piece for what I'm going to end up doing, which is decoupage, but any gaps or dips in the drawer faces could create air pockets where moisture can collect. The same principle applies to when you're attaching a veneer to a wood surface. You want to make sure that you eliminate as much space between what you're trying to attach and what you're attaching it to so that moisture can't get in there and ruin it. After the filler had dried, I went in with 120 grit sandpaper and my orbital sander and sanded everything until it was smooth. For this project, I wanted to attach a poster or some cool wallpaper to the drawer fronts. I ended up deciding a poster would give me more versatility with this project because you can order posters from just about anywhere. I purchased this poster off of Society 6, which is a website where you can buy products from artists. I will link the poster I used below in the description. The artist I selected has a bunch of amazing other items, so I recommend checking out his work if you like this print. I will mention I have never decoupaged furniture before, and so that usually entails a bunch of experimentation for me. Normally on non-furniture items I would use Mod Podge and attach the poster or whatever paper product it was, but I was trying to use what I had on hand, and I saw that someone had used polyurethane to decoupage. Spoiler alert, this did not work. I applied a thin coat of the polyurethane to the bottom drawer, and after I had attached it and cut it, it started to bubble up on the edges. So, fair warning, this was not the best way to do this. I mean, it did work, it did adhere, but I did have to go back and fix some of the edges. I didn't cut the poster to size for each drawer before starting either, because the drawer faces were rounded on the edges. You can either pre-cut them to size or you can cut them as you go, whichever you prefer. I had some Elmer's Craft Bond from my record cabinet stenciling project. The label says that if you apply Craft Bond within 15 seconds, it will have a solid bond. It mentions not using Craft Bond on thicker projects, but the poster attached just fine using the Craft Bond. I made sure to apply a liberal amount before moving the poster over to the drawer front. After I attached the poster, I really focused on making sure that there were no air bubbles under the poster itself. When I seal the poster, I don't want anything bubbling up underneath it and then ruining the image. So I just very carefully made sure to flatten it out and check all the different areas. Now if you do get an air bubble underneath it, you could poke the air bubble and then try to press it down so that it seals to the surface. I used the same process to attach the poster to the drawer fronts, and then once it was attached, I rough cut the edges as I moved to the next drawer. I used an X-Acto knife at a 45-degree angle to shave off the excess poster edges. Since the edges were rounded, I couldn't just flip the drawer faces over and cut them, and this worked out pretty well. It's a bit difficult and your edges aren't going to be perfect, but they can be cleaned up with some sandpaper. And that's exactly what I did. I took one of my orbital sanding discs of 120 grit and I just lightly went along the edges, and there's little paper pieces that came off as I was going, but this really smoothed out a lot of the rougher cuts that the X-Acto knife had made. After all the drawer faces had the edges cleaned up, I took a tack cloth and cleaned up any paper and wood dust that was on the surface. Normally, if this was just a regular wood project, I would use a damp microfiber cloth and then go through and clean everything up. But obviously we don't want to get this poster wet, and this also gave me the opportunity to make sure that I didn't miss any bubbles that might potentially have caused issues down the road. To paint the dresser, I used Behr paint in the color black. It was the best complementary color to the poster. I ended up using a craft brush to paint the edges of the drawer fronts. I did not use tape for this. Using tape meant that I had to attach the tape to an unsealed poster, which is paper. This created the risk for the tape to potentially rip or damage the poster, which is why I decided not to use tape. Realistically, this is the part that took me the longest out of this project. I hand painted around all of the edges of the drawers twice. but it came out looking really nice. If you don't have a steady hand, you could use cardboard along the edges and then tape it to the wood, not the poster, to hold it into place. I used my Zebra 2-inch angle brush to paint the body of the dresser black to match the drawers. I applied 2 coats of paint, allowing the paint to dry fully between the coats. I wanted to point out that I did have brush strokes, but sanding between coats helps minimize the appearance of brush strokes. Also, if you lightly apply the paint in thinner coats, you're less likely to have brush strokes. So if you're using a paintbrush instead of a sprayer, just think about it as you're going to apply multiple coats with multiple layers, and the thinner the layers are, the more smooth they're going to be in the end. To seal the drawers, I initially wanted to try using aerosol water-based polyurethane. It was out at all of the stores I went to, so instead I went to Michael's and found Mod Podge clear acrylic sealer spray in Satin. I purchased 2 cans at $9 a piece with the coupon, and I ended up using both cans and sprayed over the drawer fronts around 6 times. Each time I sprayed it, I allowed it to dry in between coats. Something else I want to point out is that you really want to wipe down the drawers with a tack cloth before sealing. You cannot really sand these drawers down between coats, and any dust that settles on them while they're curing can cause little bumps in the surface. I did very lightly sand down some really noticeable spots, but they weren't completely gone either. This was done after my 4th coat, so it lowered the chance that I would sand down the awesome poster that was on the drawer fronts. To seal the dresser body, I used Varathane Ultimate water-based polyurethane in Satin. I didn't have any cloudiness to the 3 coats that I applied, which can happen with darker paints. I did water my poly down a bit because it's very hot in Florida, which gave me some extra time so that the polyurethane could level out. While I was waiting for the polyurethane to dry in between the 3 coats that I applied to it, I went ahead and attached new handles to the drawers. And here's the final dresser. I went with top pulls so that the picture would stand out on the drawer fronts. Some log center pulls would look nice too. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, could you kindly destroy the like button and click subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Thanks for watching.